today?
I'm good, Anna. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you for coming back again.
Pleasure.
It's great to see you. Now, we have a really big question today, which is one that I find it's a topic that's quite dear to my heart because it's something I've come across before. So I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on it. Before we go into that, can you share with me what it is that you would love your friends, your family, your loved ones to know or understand about diet culture that they don't?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to speak to kind of really recent events for this one. So just yesterday, I think in Australian time, Nancy Pelosi in the US made some comments about Trump and used the phrase morbidly obese. And obese and overweight, we generally in the kind of HAES sphere, we refer to those as the O words, and we generally don't use them.
Yeah.
Because we've come to an understanding that words like obese and overweight are not very good descriptors of really anything. They're medicalized and they're pathologized. They kind of... and there's so much to be said about the BMI, which is a scale that we kind of use overweight and obese to. That's how we use them. So I'm getting a bit tongue-tied. But yeah, if you want to learn a bit more about the history of the BMI and how that's so faulty, your fat friend has written a great free essay on Medium about that, and that's maybe something we can link to.
Yeah, I'll definitely link to that.
Yeah, so something that I would really love more people to know about, particularly the people I love, is kind of about that use of language and how stigmatizing it is and how easily it can... It's like it feels quite benign until you know. And when you know and when you really feel what it's like to have a word like that said about your body and to feel the way that your body can be pathologized because of its size, then you really know.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think I'd like more people to know about. And the other thing, I guess, the same thing with that language is that your fat friends and your fat loved ones are listening when you talk about other people's bodies. So in this case of talking about Trump, who I am no fan of, when you talk about your fat enemies or your fat villains, when you talk about Trump, when you use words like fat or overweight or you make fun of someone's size, we can hear you. And it kind of reiterates to us that if just a few things were different about our relationship with you, then maybe you'd be talking about us the same way. And I think sometimes when you might bring this up with someone and say, you know, actually I don't like it when you talk about someone's body in that way, even though you don't like them. You might get a response like, oh, but I'm not talking about you. You know, you're not fat in that way. Well, I am. And language really matters. Yeah. So that's really... I don't think I've been very articulate there, but I think definitely that Your Fat Friend article about BMI, and she's also got some just excellent writing about talking to your fat friends or to friends in fatter bodies that are really, really excellent, that I recommend.
And that's just such a good point, because I think a lot of people who aren't aware of the damage that words like language like that can bring. And I think most people recognise that there's words like obese and overweight and fat can carry a lot of negativity. And if they don't understand it from a fat phobic perspective, like understanding the harm of that, you know, people can be using it without meaning harm, but it can come across really harmful. Yeah, language is so important. Let's move into the question. So I'm going to read it word for word as our member has shared it. And our member says, I have recently learnt that I have a health condition that could lead to problems such as diabetes or heart disease if not dealt with. And the only preventative treatment for me is to lose weight. How can I go about this in a way that's not damaging to my mental health?
What a doozy.
Yeah, I reckon.
What a tricky situation. So, I mean, we don't know if this person has a history of eating disorders or disordered eating, already, but definitely for someone with an eating disorder history, intentional weight loss or dieting is really contraindicated in almost every circumstance, because we know just how judgmental it is to mental health.
Yeah.
So this person is in quite a tricky situation, and this is where I really, really want to strongly recommend working with a dietitian. And I'm going to say, look specifically for a dietitian rather than, say, a nutritionist. And there are some differences in those professions, and I do not mean that to bag out nutritionists. I was training to be a nutritionist. Nutritionists do excellent work. In this case, I would recommend looking for a dietitian, because I think you need to look for someone who has experience working with the medical model, someone who has experience working with doctors in healthcare settings, and maybe even with hospitals, because there's some language there and some access there around your care that having someone on your team who works from a HAES perspective, who is fat positive, it might be really, really helpful to have them on your team to help do a bit of the translating and the advocating for you.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. So HAES as a paradigm, as a health paradigm, is weight neutral. So losing weight or gaining weight is not seen as good or bad. It just is. It's just what happens when you live your life. And we say that, you know, whatever a good weight or a normal weight or a healthy weight is, it's just the weight that you happen to be at when you're engaging in healthy behaviours and living your life. And even that, I feel, is not a perfect definition, because health is so different for so many different people. But that's where we're at with that. So even though HAES is weight neutral, we still acknowledge that intentional attempts at weight loss usually lead to long-term weight gain, and they usually have physiological, so body, and psychological, mind, effects that generally we would term as quite negative.
Yeah.
So intentional weight loss is not a benign activity, no matter how you go about it. Even if you're doing it in a quote unquote healthy or gentle or sensible way, intentional weight loss, more likely than not, you're going to end up gaining probably a bit more than the weight you lost back. And you might not come out of it unscathed, mentally and physiologically speaking. So it's not an activity to be engaging in lightly. So my questions for this person, they've said that the only preventative treatment for them is to lose weight. And my question there is it really?
Yeah.
What kind of research has been done about this condition and about potential other preventative treatments? And this is where having someone like a dietitian on your team who maybe understands research language a bit more and might already have access to some of that might be really helpful. You don't need to do all of this work yourself, because it is a lot of work. And then my other question is it the loss of weight itself that has been shown to be helpful in preventing this condition, or is it the activities associated with the weight loss? So is it perhaps that increasing physical activity is useful in preventing this condition? Or is it that changing some nutritional aspects of your diet is helpful in preventing this condition? Because we know that engaging in those kind of behaviours that we would generally call health promoting doesn't always lead to weight loss, but it can really often lead to positive health effects, even if you're gaining weight while you're doing it. So that's something that I would be trying to pass out. And then another question I have is this person's weight a barrier to receiving care? Because we know that there are some surgeries, some procedures, even some doctors who put weight barriers in place around receiving care, who'll say, you know, in order for you to receive this surgery, which might actually improve your quality of life by allowing you more access to movement or being less in pain, that you can't have that surgery until you lose X amount of weight.
Yeah.
That is so awful, so unfair, and often not based on any quality research. And often we've kind of heard from some people within that medical paradigm that sometimes it's kind of just about testing patient compliance, which again is awful.
Yeah.
So if that's the situation that you're stuck in, through no fault of your own, where your weight is presenting a barrier to accessing surgery or proper care, please lean on someone like a dietitian to help you there. They might be able to write a letter or make a phone call to your doctor or your surgeon. Shop around for another doctor or a surgeon. And then if the situation happens to be that the only way for you to access a particular type of care is for you to show that you can lose X amount of kilos, don't blame yourself for being in that situation, because that's not your fault. That's something external that's being placed on you. It's really awful. But if that's what you need to do to survive, to get surgery, to be in less pain, to XYZ, I don't think that's something that you should blame yourself for.
Yeah.
You don't need to beat yourself up. Now, in terms of how, so say I'm in a situation where in order to prevent this condition from coming on, I need to lose X amount of kilos. Oh gosh, with my history of an eating disorder, I will be wanting to make sure I have a HAES dietitian on my team, and I'm going to be seeing them regularly. I want to be checking in with my therapist, and if you don't have a therapist, I would get one, so a counsellor, a psychologist, or a psychotherapist who works in HAES, because you're going to need some extra mental support. If you have any friends or any family who is sympathetic to HAES or to weight neutral approaches or to understanding the minefield of dieting, get them on board to help you to provide support somehow. Because my concern is that, oh gosh, it's going to get messy. Like, we know how easy it is for simple changes in your diet, in what you're eating, to turn into something much more serious, like disordered eating or an eating disorder. It's just so easy, especially if that's in your history. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been one of the biggest concerns that I thought about with this too, is what is this person's history with dieting and relationship with food like? And that's what really bothers me about traditional weight-centric care, is that that's never really taken into account. It's just not understood.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you brought all that up.
Yeah, and I'm thinking in my situation with my body, where if we were going to use the BMI scale, I would be classified as severely obese. If I needed a particular care and my doctor said, well, look, based on your weight, you need to lose X amount of weight to get into this category in order to receive this care, I wonder what would happen if I told them, actually, I have a history with eating disorders. Weight loss, intentional weight loss is contraindicated with my history. What else can we do?
Yep.
I wonder what my doctor would say. And that's not, I kind of want to keep that open to the possibility that my doctor would not be helpful. And that would be a really awful experience to have a doctor say, well, you just have to.
Yeah.
And I would need some help. If that happened, if I went to a doctor and they said that all I have to do, like all I can do is lose weight or I can't get care, or they say something like, unless you lose this weight, you're just going to get sicker and sicker.
Yeah.
Oh, I really need some support after that. I would be wanting to make some supportive phone calls and saying, I need to cry at you for a while.
Yeah.
Because I just know my eating disorder mind would kick right into gear there.
Yeah, and especially heartbreaking if you've done a lot of work on, moving away from that and healing your relationship with food, and then something like this comes up and it brings it all back up and away again.
Yeah.
Really good points about getting support from all different avenues. So I'm going to include some links to some of our non-diet dietitian friends who are in the HAES space, and also some psychologists who work in that space, just so that information's available to this person and others who might want it. What you mentioned too about like getting support, getting advice from a non-diet and HAES professional. I wonder if this person might consider talking to a HAES GP even.
If you can find one, they're in short supply, and we love the ones we have. Yeah,
we have one that I can highly recommend, who's local here in the West, and she's wonderful. But I don't personally know of anybody beyond that, like outside of just a general practitioner. And something that I thought about just now too is like, I wonder how it would be, like how you just mentioned, how would my doctor respond if I went to them and said, and said that. How would it be if someone in a smaller body had the same condition? I always wonder.
Yeah, that's a great question to
We don't know
to
what the
doctors.
condition is, right? And I do
Yeah.
wonder what, and you mentioned this before too, what is this condition? And is there real evidence and research to show that the only possible solution, preventative treatment, is weight loss? So I do kind of question that. And I think sometimes digging a little bit further can be quite interesting there.
Yeah.
And this is where, depending on what it is, it could be something that could be interesting. We've talked about Fiona Willer before, but she has such great research-based, evidence around different conditions and things that get blamed on weight. So it could be really interesting to find out a little bit more about that. So I'll just do an extra link to that as well.
Yeah, and whatever condition it is, I'd recommend doing a quick internet search for like fat positive X, fat positive diabetes care, fat positive blah, 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 to try and find some groups of people who are in larger bodies and who are dealing with those conditions, because they're out there. They're out there for sure. Particularly, I know on Facebook, there are lots of fat positive diabetes groups and other groups like that, where people are really specifically trying to keep themselves psychologically safe while managing their condition.
Yeah, and that was the question here too. How can I go about this in a way that's not damaging to my mental health?
Yeah,
so that's obviously, like, first and foremost important to this member. I think there's a great practitioner. She might be a dietitian. I think it's Margaret Fletcher, who does
yes,
diabetes.
she does weight neutral diabetes care training.
So that's another link that I'll link to as well.
Yeah, and I think that question about what would you say to someone in a smaller body who has my same symptoms, you could also flip that a little bit to say to your doctor, okay, so let's say I lost X amount of weight, but my markers, my blood pressure, my XYZ hadn't improved. What would be the next course of action? To try and kind of shake out that weight-centric headspace a bit, and to try and brainstorm what are the other things I can do.
That's a really good point too. And what you mentioned before too about the behaviours, I think that's really important too, and that's really what HAES is all about. Like you said, is focusing on behaviours, just not pursuing intentional weight loss, recognising that there are plenty of health promoting behaviours that we can all pursue, no matter what size we are. And so bringing the focus to that could help this member, regardless of what happens with their weight.
Yeah. I feel like I haven't been as maybe straightforward or articulate as usual for this one, because it does feel quite close to home, I guess, where
you've done a great job. It's been lovely listening to you as always.
But it's something I think about a lot in my particular body size, with my relationship with my doctors, where I think, I've got a family history of X, Y, and Z. If at one point in my life my markers change, it looks like I'm going to get one of these conditions, how is my doctor going to treat me? And that's a real fear, and you're allowed to be scared of that, because we're just acknowledging what's real. Yeah,
that's really helpful to hear too. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. Do you want to do a quick little sum up for us? Just your
sure. So there's kind of two prongs, and the first one is to really question what is the evidence base for the suggestion of weight loss. Is it more likely that you would be able to find improvements through changing behaviours, through adding medication, through doing some things that aren't necessarily tied to weight? Because I think, and Fiona Willer goes into this in Unpacking Weight Science, that often research that kind of concludes that weight loss is helpful for all of these various health conditions are actually ignoring the impact of the behaviours, and also kind of ignoring the people who engaged in behaviours and had improvements but didn't lose any weight, because that's possible as well. And then the other prong is, goodness me, make sure you have some support. Find yourself a HAES dietitian or a psychologist, someone who has experience working with a medical model, working with doctors. Let them know every single thing about what's going on and how you're feeling, and ask them, in the capacity as your dietitian or as your psychologist or whatever it is, to support you in this. Can they write letters to your GP? Can they call surgeons? Can they do XYZ? Because you don't need to do this alone, and You know, you want to just kind of set yourself up to receive as little damage as possible, I guess.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think it's hard to advocate for yourself in these situations when it can be so emotionally challenging, and especially if this person has a history with dieting and maybe disordered eating or eating disorders.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Pleasure.
Really helpful as always. Such a pleasure. So we can find you on Make Space Counselor. Is it makespacecounselling.com?
Makespacecounselling.com, yeah.
Beautiful. And as always, I will share links to all of this stuff, and we'll look forward to having you back again next week.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Rachel.